Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I'm Brian Jewell. I am your host, and I'm really honored to be with you today for a special bonus episode of Gather and Go. Today, we're teaming up with our friends at the United States Civil Rights Trail and the Mississippi Department of Tourism to bring you a really stunning story from Mississippi's past. I'm going to play an episode for you from the Mississippi Freedom Trail podcast that is about the life of Vernon Dahmer. Vernon Dahmer was a voting rights activist in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I'm not going to spoil the story for you, but let me just say, the first time I listened to this audio, I just kind of sat at my desk, stunned with tears in my eyes. It is powerful. It is moving. It is inspiring. I think you're really, really going to love it. Now, the Mississippi Freedom Trail podcast is part of the United States Civil Rights Trail podcast channel, and you can hear much more content like this, as well as get lots of information about how you and your travelers can visit some of the places in Mississippi and throughout the country where monumental events in the civil rights movement took place. You can find information about how to do all of that at civilrightstrail.com. But for now, let me invite you to settle in, open up your mind, and get ready to be inspired by this powerful story from the Mississippi Freedom Trail podcast.
As a warning, this episode includes harsh language. Please be advised.
Vernon Dahmer wasn't like most black men in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. His family going back was never enslaved. There was a history of interracial marriage that left Vernon navigating the South as a black man, often mistaken for a white man. He was also very successful at business. He owned a cotton farm, sawmill, raised cattle, and owned a country store in Kelly's Settlement, a rural community just outside of Hattiesburg. Dahmer carefully straddled the white and black worlds of southeastern Mississippi, doing business with the white residents while fighting for the rights of its black residents, fighting especially hard for the right to vote. In the 1960s, he led the local NAACP chapter, and he invited volunteers from SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, to help organize a mass voter registration drive known as Freedom Summer. He could be heard again and again telling friends and neighbors, if you don't vote, you don't count. Yet, he refused to register to vote when offered. This baffled the white people he did business with, says his son, Dennis Dahmer. They would often ask,
why are you doing these type things when you are living better than most white men in this county? You can do anything you want in this county. You're successful in your businesses. You know, everybody buys from you. Everybody likes you. So what is it that you hope to gain out of this civil right? Well, his answer was, look, everybody deserves to be treated fairly, especially if they're a taxpayer. Now, these people pay taxes. I pay taxes. You pay taxes. We all deserve to be treated the same. We should be treated equally because we are citizens and we should have all the rights that you have, including voting.
This is season 2 of the Mississippi Freedom Trail podcast, a series where the people who push for civil rights and their family members tell their stories of the role they played in Mississippi's civil rights movement. You'll hear the real stories of people who drew from courage and persistence to make voting a reality for the black residents of Mississippi. This is the first of 4 episodes, and we begin in Hattiesburg to tell the story of Vernon Dahmer. Hattiesburg, Mississippi, in the 1960s was one of the largest cities in the state, with an economy built on lumber, cotton, and the chemical industry. Most notably, the Hercules Chemical Company, which employed both white and Black workers.
You had a lot of Black folks here who actually owned their homes in Hattiesburg. They were not sharecropping on some plantation. Some of them were able to get fairly decent employment because you had something similar to a middle class where people were better off financially than they were, say, maybe sharecropping on some plantation. They owned their homes, typically probably better educated. When the activists came here, there were a lot of people like Vernon Dahmer who prior to that and still were members of the NAACP. There were churches that were actively involved in the movement prior to it being a quote-unquote movement, and other leaders.
Dennis Dahmer says some people thought of Hattiesburg as a progressive city, but segregation was ingrained there. The business side of segregation involved the Hattiesburg White Citizens Council. Formed in the mid-1950s, councils like this included business and elected leaders, and they targeted anyone and any business that worked to dismantle segregation. Vernon Dahmer, who often did business with members of the white community, moved carefully, yet openly, in support of civil rights.
It was difficult for him to be successful in his business and to push this political agenda.
The right to vote was Vernon's primary focus. And in early 1960s Mississippi, that was very much the focus of civil rights activists working to register Black voters. By the time the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965, fewer than 10% of Black residents were registered to vote. Before the landmark legislation, barriers like poll taxes and literacy tests prevented Black residents from voting. These rules kept whites in power, especially in the rural counties where Blacks often outnumbered them.
In about 1952, 53, somewhere along in there, a group of Black businessmen in Hattiesburg, my dad was not part of that group, about 10 or 12 of them, they hired a lawyer, filed a lawsuit against the local register of voters for discrimination, okay? So we're talking 1950s Mississippi.
Dennis says it was difficult to find any lawyers, Black or white, to file that kind of lawsuit.
And they found one here who was a retired judge. And the case went all the way to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans before it was thrown out. But then in the early 60s, another group files lawsuit. My dad is part of that group. But this time, they have the backing of the United States Attorney General's office. And they were successful in the early 60s in forcing the local register of voters to give Black folks equal access to register. You could always go and attempt to register, but you could never pass the verbal part of the test.
That's what happened when his mother Ellie went to register. She described what happened when she approached the registrar in the county's voting office in an interview in 2015. It's part of the Civil Rights History Project collection at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress.
We would go down, fill out the application. Mr. Lynn never looked at you. And you would say, I forgot to fill out. He said, and turn around. He gave me a card. 2x5 card with the Constitution on part of, not all the Constitution, some of the Constitution on the card. He told me to read that. They didn't tell him what it meant. And of course, I read it and I could very well explain it to him. He would tell me, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You didn't pass. He never listened.
Then there was a $2 poll tax, a lot to pay for someone who made $5 a day and was unlikely to leave the courthouse with a voting card.
And then there was the fear and intimidation in there, okay? If you were bold enough to actually go down to the courthouse, pay the tax, and attempt to register, I think back during that time, they printed in the paper the name of the persons who attempted to register. Plus, there was always this group of whites hanging around the courthouse, looking, watching, seeing who's doing what. So if you were employed somewhere here in a local business and you attempted that, you could easily be fired.
Taking a pause here to say that if you're interested in following the Mississippi Freedom Trail through places like Hattiesburg and elsewhere in the state, go to visithberg.org, visitmississippi.org, or civilrightstrail.com. You can also check the show notes for links to these websites and other resources. It's a great way to begin planning your trip. Okay, back to the story. For most of Mississippi's Black residents, carrying a voter registration card was only a dream. On the other hand, carrying an NAACP card could cause a nightmare. Dennis Dahmer says his father understood the risks of being both a member and a leader of the civil rights organization.
Then he takes it on to be the president. That was a pretty dangerous thing to do back in the 50s. And not only join the NAACP, but be in the leadership of it was quite obvious that you were in the organization.
Tired of the failed literacy tests, poll taxes, and intimidation, activists launched what became known as Freedom Summer in 1964. It was a courageous statewide push designed to both draw national attention and erode the racist barriers that kept Black residents from the ballot box. Dennis Dahmer was only about 10 years old then, but he remembers an event his father held on their farm that was part of Freedom Summer.
So we always gave these big picnics out by this Dahmer Lake, this 5-acre lake that my dad had built years ago out here on the farm. And every 4th of July, we having these big picnics. It was about that time of year, and my dad told me, I said, hey, y'all take the tractor and the trailer, and y'all go get a load of watermelons and carry them out here to this old Bay Springs schoolhouse. Okay. So we did. We just assumed it was another 4th of July picnic until the people started showing up. And then that's when I knew, hey, that this is something different than what we've done in the past, because in the past had been predominantly Black. But now, here's this crowd that's about at least a third white here at this isolated spot that we'd never done the picnic at before. He purposely chose this location because it was isolated. Because if white folks would have rode by and saw a bunch of whites out there around that barn, they would have immediately assumed, hey, that's some of them civil rights people out there on Dahmer's place. So he purposely held it here to keep down the potential of conflict, with some of them showing up uninvited. And it would have definitely been some conflict.
Volunteers from SNCC and young activists descended on the Dahmer farm. Some of them stayed at the family home while mobilizing voter registration campaigns.
And they did. It took them a while, but they finally started, and, they got the mass meetings going. Then after that, they got more and more activists coming in to Hattiesburg. And the next thing you know, they're holding marches and stuff. In fact, I believe it got to the point where folks like my dad, the older group, they didn't really know what these young folks were doing or planning. They didn't. I think they found out about a lot of it after it happened. And they'd gotten arrested. And they were in jail. So when that happened, my dad and the ones in his generation, they're concerned about what could happen to them in the jailhouses, right? They understand this place. So immediately, they'd raise the money themselves to bail them out. Because a lot of time, whatever organization they were with, they may not have had money to bail them out.
There was a cost for Vernon Dahmer's civil rights work. He was denied loans. His wife, Ellie, was denied jobs. and everyone was afraid for Vernon Dahmer's safety. Ellie wanted him to put a pause on his activism until all of the children were grown. But he wouldn't wait, so they did what they could to protect him.
We didn't let him go nowhere in a car by himself. Dennis could drive well, even though he didn't have no license. We told him to get him, if something happened to him, if somebody shoot in their car, and shoot him to get him to the hospital, run the lights if he had to, and we would deal with that later. He was not on the tractor in the field by himself. Somebody was always with him. Of course, he always had a girl. He was one of these people that didn't try to drive when he was going there. Well, he had to see everything, but he didn't let a car pass him. He would get in the middle of the road before he could let the car pass because he was afraid they would shoot him. He didn't know who it was in that car behind him. He didn't let them pass him. We kept the front porch light off because we were afraid they would shoot him covered in the door or something.
Vernon knew that the Ku Klux Klan were watching him, and he and his family were never too far from a loaded gun.
So these individuals out there, my dad knows they're out there. We know who some of them are. He knows who some of them are. No doubt about it. They know who he is. So my dad's approach is he doesn't live in fear of the Klan. He knows what the Klan is capable of doing. His agenda is never let them catch you unprepared. So we were a heavily armed family. Anywhere we went, my dad was always armed. My older brothers were always armed. Even if we went to work in the fields, we were armed all the time.
Dennis Dahmer says not only did his father's civil rights work anger local Klansmen, his success also enraged them.
My dad bought a cotton picker. He bought this cotton picker because prior to that, we were hiring people to pick cotton. And he paid more than anybody else. People were treated fairly, never cheated out of what they earned. But the mere fact that he bought the cotton picker irritated the Klansmen. They were mad because they thought he was trying to show off. It wasn't that. People no longer wanted to pick cotton. After about 64 and the civil rights thing started loosening up opportunities, they could get better jobs. So they didn't want to do it. So he did what all the other farmers did. They went to mechanical pickers. But when he buys one, they just go absolutely crazy, harassing him. But they would call, mother would answer the phone, trying to take a message, and they said, well, you just tell that N-word, we gonna kill him. He thinks he's a white. He ain't white. And we gonna kill that N-word. You tell him that. So my dad had been a person that they hadn't liked for a long time because of his success economically and because of the way he looked.
Then on January 9th, 1966, Vernon Dahmer went on the radio letting people know he would pay their poll tax.
So a lot of times you hear this scenario where he makes the announcement he's going to pay poll tax, and then a bunch of Klansmen decide to attack him. They are too late. No, Klan had been planning this attack against my dad for some time. He's looking to be attacked. That's why we're heavily armed. And there were times when we would maintain guards 24/7, even during the daylight out on a Sunday. Older brothers would be setting guard, just watching, see who's driving by, see if you see the same cars coming by, that type thing. But what happened is they quit calling. They quit shooting the windows out in the store, mailboxes, because they moved to this other mode. They're actually now in the planning mode. And it was just an incident, just a happenstance, that my dad had made the announcement about paying poll taxes for anybody that was willing to attempt to register to vote. And these Klansmen decided to take it upon themselves that they were going to make an example out of him.
Early on Monday, January 10th, cars full of Klan members rolled up to the Dahmers' home.
They caught us by surprise. 2 carloads of them, about 2 o'clock in the morning. They come rolling to the yard, cut the engines off, cut the headlights off up the road. So cars coasted into the yard. My dad had the driveway filled with we call wash gravel. So anytime a car or something drives through that gravel, it makes a noise. You can hear it going through that gravel. So my mother heard that, and she heard car doors opening and closing. And that's when she alerts my dad. I said, Vernon, I believe they got us this time.
2 carloads full of Klan members drove up to firebomb both his house and the country store.
So my dad jumps up, grabs his gun. Klansmen got the house surrounded. They're shooting into the house, in front of the house. Same time, my dad is returning fire, running through the house from door to window to door, back and forth. Probably empties at least 3, 4, maybe 5 shotguns, rifles, whatever. We all had weapons in every bedroom. Rifles loaded to be prepared for something like this. So as he's shooting back at them and they're shooting at him, at some point or another, they throw the jugs of gasoline in through the window, the punctured jugs, and they throw torches in behind it, doing this gun battle. So now my dad is running through the flames, continuing to fire back at these individuals. And about that time, one of the Klansmen gets nervous and turns the headlights on the car. This is all from their statements that they made, these Klansmen. When that happens, the other Klansmen get nervous. They think that they've actually been ambushed by the FBI. So the Klansmen are shooting at one another. My dad is shooting at the Klansmen. And eventually he drives them from the place, but the house and the store is already on fire.
Vernon Dahmer survived the shootings, but died later in a hospital bed from severe lung damage. His wife, Ellie, was with him in the hospital when he died.
Sleep, I went around the side where his face was turned. And I laid my head down there on the bed and I went to sleep. And the next thing, he raised up and hollered my name and he was gone there.
News of Vernon's death traveled through the area, and soon a large crowd of angry Black residents gathered at the courthouse seeking justice. President Lyndon B. Johnson wired his condolences to Ellie. Then something arrived in the mail addressed to Vernon, this crusader of voting rights who never cast a ballot.
After he was killed, his voter registration card comes in the mail. My mother gets her card, and my older brother living here at that time, he gets his card. And all that comes in the mail months after he's dead.
While Vernon never got to vote himself, his work was vital to the larger mission that successfully resulted in others being able to cast their ballots. The Voting Rights Act, which had passed a year earlier in 1965, enabled a dramatic increase in Black voter registration, especially due to the suspension of discriminatory barriers, such as literacy tests. Many African Americans who had previously tried and failed to register due to local resistance, unfair tests, or outright intimidation were now able to successfully register. And for about 32 years, no one was held accountable for Vernon Dahmer's murder. 4 trials with all-white juries had previously ended in deadlock. But in 1998, a witness finally stepped forward and testified that Sam Bowers, a leader in the Ku Klux Klan in Mississippi, had ordered the assassination. Bowers was sentenced to life in prison, and he died there in 2006. Ellie Dahmer would go on to serve more than a decade as an election commissioner in Hattiesburg, and Dennis Dahmer continues to tell his family story.
I tell people, think about him in terms of the life that he lived, who he was as a person, a guy who believed in America. He knew that there were things wrong within America, but he believed that those things could be changed. And he believed in being responsible and carrying out your civic duty, which includes voting. Also, it includes speaking out when things are going on that you do not like. So do that loudly. Speak out and speak up, and boldly.
On Vernon Dahmer's grave are the words he said so many times as he fought for the Black residents of Mississippi's right to vote. If you don't vote, you don't count. In the next episode of this podcast series, we explore the life and work of Joyce Ladner. An activist at an early age, she was part of the movement to register voters in the Mississippi Delta.
There was always a level of fear hovering in the background over us. But I always said that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to prevail in spite of it. That you come to terms with your fear, and then you proceed.
After listening to the podcast, plan a trip along the Mississippi Freedom Trail. There are 52 sites throughout the state that tell the stories of the movement and honor important people of the era. Go to visit Mississippi.org or civilrightstrail.com to learn more. You can also check the show notes for links to these websites and other resources. In this episode, we heard from Dennis and Ellie Dahmer. I'm Marlene Gordon. The Mississippi Freedom Trail podcast is sponsored by Visit Mississippi and the U.S. Civil Rights Trail Marketing Alliance. The series was produced by Ingredient Creative with Tanner Latham as executive producer and Catherine Welch as the writer. Elliot Majerzik edited and mixed the sound.
Well, what a powerful and compelling story from our friends in Mississippi. If you'd like to hear more podcast episodes like this, there's a whole season of Mississippi civil rights stories that is part of the U.S. Civil Rights Trail podcast. And you can find that on their channel in just about any podcast playing app. That includes, of course, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can learn more about Mississippi's civil rights history and how you and your travelers can visit the places where history happened at visitmississippi.org and learn more about the U.S. Civil Rights Trail at civilrightstrail.com. And we'll be back with a regular episode of the podcast next week. Until then, remember, at the end of the day, we're all on this trip together. So let's make it a good one. See you next time.